Matt, are you really going to miss the birth of your child just to close a deal? Deal's worth more than you're ever going to be, Stacy, Matt replied, his voice cold and detached as he fixed his tie. I stared at him, a lump forming in my throat. How did we get to this point? At 36 weeks pregnant and on maternity leave, I had slowly become accustomed to Matt's increasing absence. His real estate career consumed him, leaving little room for our marriage. Before my pregnancy, I was a dedicated marketing executive. Now, my days were filled with preparing for our baby boy, while Matt's days were filled with contracts and property viewings. Angie, my best friend since college, had been an incredible support. Stacy, you need to stop worrying about Matt and focus on yourself and the baby, she often said, her voice firm but kind. Easy for you to say, I replied once, tears pooling in my eyes. You're not married to a ghost. Angie squeezed my hand. You deserve better. Remember that. My parents, Lydia and Fred, lived nearby and were another source of steadiness in this storm. Dad helped set up the nursery, while Mom fussed over me, making sure I ate well and rested. Stacy, darling, you need to take it easy, Mom reminded me as she set a plate of food in front of me. Stress isn't good for the baby. Thanks, Mom. I forced a smile, eyes darting to my phone, hoping irrationally for a message from Matt. But there was nothing. Days turned into nights, and Matt's empty promises became a grim routine. He'd drag himself home late, reeking of deals and desperation. Busy night? I asked one evening when he finally stumbled in. Don't start, Stacy. I closed a huge deal today, he snapped, barely glancing at me. The tension grew, but I clung to hope that the birth of our child would bring him back to us. One late afternoon, while resting on the couch, the door clicked open. Hey, Matt, I began, only for my words to trail off as Angie walked in. Matt's not here? I shook my head. Out with clients again. She sighed deeply. Come on, let's get you out for a walk. Clear your head. We strolled slowly down our tree-lined street, Angie chatting about her latest project at work. The normalcy of it was a balm, if only temporary. Back home, I shuffled through the nursery, adjusting tiny socks and folding baby clothes. The car arrived, signaling Matt's return. Matt, can we talk? I began quietly. Not now, Stacy, he murmured, eyes glued to his phone. I bit my lip, fighting the urge to scream. How long could this continue? I placed a hand on my belly, feeling a tiny kick. Soon, I reminded myself. As the days passed, one question haunted me. Could Matt be the father our son needed? Mom, what am I going to do? I found myself asking during another quiet dinner. One step at a time, Stacy, she replied gently. We'll be here for you, no matter what. Matt's phone buzzed with another urgent message, and he picked up without hesitation. I glanced at him, heart heavy. The baby kicked again, a fierce reminder of the life about to change. Matt, I tried again, voice trembling, please be here when I need you, when our son needs you. He looked up briefly, a flicker of something in his eyes before it vanished. I'll do my best, Stacy. But his best, I feared, wouldn't be enough. The pain hit suddenly, sharp and twisting. I doubled over, gripping the kitchen counter. Mom, I cried out, struggling to catch my breath. My phone buzzed incessantly with texts from Matt. Without even looking, I knew he wasn't coming. Stacy, what's wrong? Mom rushed in, panic in her eyes. I think it's time, I panted. Mom grabbed the hospital bag, guiding me to the car as Dad fired up the engine. Hang in there, sweetie. We're almost there, Dad reassured me. We made it to the hospital, nurses swiftly taking charge. I clutched Mom's hand as we moved down the brightly lit corridors. Call Matt, I gasped between contractions. I've called him 5 times, Mom said, worry etched on her face. He's not answering. Hours felt like days as the contractions grew stronger. The hospital room blurred, white walls closing in. You're doing great, Stacy, Mom cooed, wiping my forehead. With every push, all I could think about was Matt not being here, about him treating our child as less important than his precious deals. I ground my teeth, focusing on the baby's need to come out healthy. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a wail filled the room. My son, my beautiful Nathan. He's perfect, Stacy, Mom said, tears streaming down her face as she handed him to me. I gazed at Nathan, emotions flooding me. The joy of holding him battled with the heartbreak of Matt's absence. As Nathan nestled in my arms, I forced myself to focus on his tiny face, his small breath against my skin. Meeting ran late. I'll come by later. Matt's text felt like a slap. I stared at his words, a cold anger growing inside me. Meeting ran late. Nothing about the birth of his son, just empty words delaying his inevitable absence. "Mom, he'll never change, will he?" I whispered, more to myself than to her. "One step at a time, honey," Mom replied, her voice breaking. Hours drifted by and Nathan fell asleep. Exhaustion took over and I dozed off with a tight grip on his little hand. I awoke to the shuffle of footsteps and the faint beep of machines, but no sign of Matt. Angie appeared, relief on her face. "How are you holding up, new mama? Look at him, Angie," I said, my voice fragile. "He's so beautiful." Angie leaned in to see Nathan, her expression softening. "He's perfect, Stacy. I'm sorry Matt's not here. You deserved better." Angie's words mirrored my own thoughts. Could I keep on hoping when it was clear Matt was never going to come through for us? Evening came, still no Matt. Nurses looked at me with kind pity, as did other new mothers with their partners by their sides. "Stacy, it's been a long day," Mom said gently. "Rest up. We'll take care of things." Nodding, I lay back, Nathan sleeping in his crib beside me. As fatigue pulled me under, one thing was painfully clear. Matt might never prioritize us. But as I glanced at Nathan, I knew I had to find a way forward. For him. For both of us. The hospital room door creaked open, and there stood Matt, looking at his phone instead of us. I glanced up from Nathan, my heart heavy with disappointment. "Finally decided to show up?" I said, unable to mask the bitterness in my voice. "Yeah, got here as soon as I could," he murmured, eyes still glued to his screen. "You missed our son's birth, Matt," I said softly, anger simmering just beneath the surface. He looked up briefly, barely glancing at Nathan before his gaze shifted back to his phone. "I had important clients, Stacy. It's not like you were alone. Your parents were here." I shook my head, disbelief all over my face. "He's your son. Doesn't that matter to you?" Matt sighed, slipping his phone into his pocket and finally stepping closer. He peered at Nathan, then back at me. "I'm here now, aren't I?" I didn't have the energy to argue. "Just hold him," I said, handing Nathan over. Matt held Nathan awkwardly, like he was a foreign object. His disconnect was palpable. "We need to talk, Matt," I began, watching him closely. "About us. About what's been happening." "Now? In the hospital?" He scoffed, eyebrow raised. "Yes, now. This can't wait," I insisted. "Our family can't wait." He handed Nathan back, turning towards the window. "What do you want me to say, Stacy? I'm trying to provide for us, to give us a good life." "A good life?" I echoed, incredulous. "A good life where you're never home? Where you miss the birth of your own child because of a meeting?" "You knew what you were marrying into," he snapped, finally locking eyes with me. "I told you my career was demanding." "But I didn't sign up for this neglect," I countered, keeping my voice steady. "You were different before. Where did that man go? People change, Stacy. This is who I am now. Deal with it." Tears burned at the edges of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "What about Nathan? What kind of father will you be to him?" "I'll provide for him. Isn't that what matters?" he said coldly. Mom re-entered the room, sensing the tension. "Everything okay here?" "Fine, Mom," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just talking." Matt pulled out his phone again, an unmistakable signal that the conversation was over for him. "I have to head back to the office. I'll check in later." And just like that, he was gone. A few days later, I was discharged. As we arrived home, Matt was nowhere to be found. Instead, my parents were there, ready to help with Nathan's adjustment. "Welcome home," they exclaimed, bringing a small moment of joy. They helped me inside, talking about the future, but my mind kept drifting back to Matt's coldness. Flashbacks of our happy days taunted me, shared breakfasts, silly arguments over movies, and plans for a future that now seemed impossible. As I settled Nathan into his crib, I whispered, "We'll be okay, little one. I promise." Then, in a burst of determination, I pulled out my laptop and started searching. For answers, for help, for a way forward. Matt's neglect and ambition had pushed me to the edge, but for Nathan's sake, I would fight. He deserved better than this. We both did. Dad offered a comforting hug. "We're here for you, Stacy, whatever you need." I nodded, with tears finally spilling over. "Thank you, Dad. I'm going to need all the help I can get." I settled Nathan into his crib and stepped into the living room, where Matt sat with his laptop, typing away. The tension was thick as I took a deep breath. "Matt, we need to talk about our finances," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He glanced up briefly, a hint of annoyance on his face. "What about them?" "How much have you spent on the condo?" I asked, my palms sweaty. It's an investment, Stacy, he replied dismissively, eyes drifting back to his screen. It'll pay off. An investment with our savings? I pressed, voice rising despite my effort to stay calm. And loans? He looked up again, irritation clear. You don't understand how business works. I understand that you're risking our future for it, I stated, struggling to keep my composure. Matt finally closed his laptop, glaring at me. This is about providing for our family and making sure we have the best. Or is it about impressing your father? I shot back, the words out before I could stop them. His eyes narrowed dangerously. Don't bring my father into this. He's already in it, Matt. You're trying to impress him at our expense, I accused, the pieces falling into place. Just then, the front door opened and Greg walked in. He raised an eyebrow at the tension. Am I interrupting something? No, Greg, just catching up on business, Matt said, his demeanor suddenly cooler. Greg smirked, nodding toward me. Stacy, you good? I nodded, taking a deep breath. Yeah, I'm fine. After an awkward pause, Greg turned to Matt. Did you tell her about the plan with the inheritance? I froze, eyes wide. What plan? Matt's face turned beet red. Greg, that's none of her concern. Greg shrugged. She's your wife, she should know. What plan, Matt? I demanded, stepping closer. Matt's jaw tightened. It's nothing, just a way to secure our family's future. He's using Nathan to gain favor with Daddy, Greg interjected, ignoring Matt's glare. Hoping a grandkid in his corner seals the deal. Is that true, Matt? I asked, my voice trembling with anger. Matt remained silent, his expression a cold mask. That silence said more than words ever could. I turned to Greg. Do you know how much debt Matt's gotten us into? Greg frowned. I didn't know the extent, but I figured it was bad. It's worse than you think, I murmured, feeling the weight of our situation. Good to know where your priorities are, Matt, Greg said disdainfully. I always knew you were a piece of work, but this, using your kid? Matt snapped. Mind your own business, Greg. Greg shrugged, just looking out for Stacy and Nathan here. Unlike some people. Exhausted and overwhelmed, I turned to Matt. We're done, Matt. I can't do this anymore. Stacy, don't be dramatic, he scoffed. We're just going through a rough patch. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. This isn't a rough patch. It's our life, and you've ruined it. With that, I walked past Matt, past Greg, and into the room where Nathan slept peacefully, unaware of the storm outside. I knew one thing for certain. I had to protect him from this mess, from Matt's reckless ambition. The fight was just beginning, and I had to be ready. Greg's parting words echoed in my mind. If you need help, Stacy, you know where to find me. The door slammed behind me as I carried Nathan to the car, my heart racing. We're staying with my parents for a while, I said through gritted teeth, not even looking back at Matt. Stacy, don't do this. You're overreacting. Matt called after me. Ignoring him, I strapped Nathan into his car seat and started the engine. I drove in silence, anger and sorrow fighting for control. Upon reaching my parents' house, Mom and Dad were waiting on the porch, concern etched in their faces. What's happening? Dad asked as he took Nathan from my arms. Matt? He's ruining our lives with his schemes, I said, barely holding back tears. Inside, Mom offered me a hot tea while Dad rocked Nathan gently. Tell us everything, Mom urged. Between sips of tea, I recounted the details. The debt, the condo, Matt's twisted plan. Their expressions darkened with every word. He has the nerve to use Nathan as a pawn, Dad growled, his protective instincts kicking in. We'll sort this out. Later that evening, while Nathan napped, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Matt. We need to talk. Come home. I shook my head, knowing a meeting would only end in more frustration. Instead, I opened my laptop and began searching for legal advice. A fighting spirit gripped me. I couldn't let Matt ruin our lives. Days turned into a week. My parents helped with Nathan, providing a stable environment I sorely needed. Meanwhile, I met with several lawyers, finally retaining a fierce one who assured me I'd have a fighting chance. A knock on my parents' door startled me one evening. I opened it to find Matt standing there, an unfamiliar coldness in his eyes. Stacy, enough of this game. Come home, he demanded. This isn't a game, Matt. You've jeopardized our future, I replied, standing firm. You're making a big mistake, he sneered. Make this easy and come back. I crossed my arms, blocking the door. I won't let you drag Nathan and me down with you. Fine, he spat, tossing an envelope at me. Divorce papers. You're holding me back anyway. I stared at the envelope, shock rendering me speechless. Matt turned and walked away without another word. Mom came to stand beside me, her presence grounding me. What did he want? He's divorcing me, I whispered, the weight of the words crushing. Mom hugged me tight. We'll get through this, Stacy, together. Returning inside, I flipped through the papers. Anger welled up. Matt had not only left me, but he had also outlined visitation rights and property divisions that favored him outrageously. No way would I let him get away with this. Days later, I learned from mutual friends in whispered conversations that Matt had moved in with a wealthy client, Celeste. The betrayal added fuel to my fire. Mom, Dad, I'm fighting back. I'm not letting Matt walk over me, I declared one morning. Good for you, Dad said, pride in his voice. Angie also stepped up, offering support. You've got this, Stacy. Nathan deserves better, and so do you. Preparations began in earnest. My lawyer gathered evidence of Matt's neglect and financial recklessness. Greg's surprising support came as an unexpected boon. He hated Matt's tactics as much as I did. One evening, Greg said, Stacy, if you need anything, count on me. Matt's dug his own grave, and I'll help you cover him up. Nathan cooed in his crib while I fed him, my resolve strengthening. We're going to be okay, Nathan. I'll make sure of it. Despite Matt's attempts to drag us down, I felt a growing sense of purpose. The courtroom confrontation was coming, and I knew I had to be ready. For Nathan. For our future. For justice. Courtrooms always felt cold, no matter the season. Sitting beside my lawyer, Mrs. Hayes, the tension in the air thickened. Matt sat across from us with his attorney, looking smug as ever. Your Honor, Mrs. Hayes began, her voice strong and clear, we present evidence of Mr. Miller's financial recklessness and neglectful behavior towards his family. My heart pounded as she laid out documents showing Matt's misuse of our savings and the loans he'd taken without my knowledge. Pictures of unfinished nursery projects and messages ignored while I was in labor flashed on the screen. Matt's attorney, Mr. Collins, tried to counter. These are measures Mr. Miller took to ensure financial stability. His investment in the condo is for the family's benefit. Mrs. Hayes didn't miss a beat. That so-called investment jeopardizes their future. More importantly, Mr. Miller's neglect cannot be justified. She turned towards me, offering a reassuring nod. Stacy, could you explain how Mr. Miller's actions have impacted your life and the life of your son? I stood, my legs slightly trembling but my voice steady. Matt has been absent, physically and emotionally. He missed our son's birth because he was at a meeting. He took our savings and put us in debt for a condo to impress clients and gain his father's approval. And now he's living with another woman, showing zero regard for our family. Matt fidgeted, clearly uncomfortable with the spotlight on his failures. A few days later, while preparing for another round in court, a knock on my door revealed Greg. I have something that might help, he said, handing over a folder. I opened it to find emails and text messages, proof of Matt's deceit and manipulation. That deal with Celeste, the financial strain, it's all here, Greg said. Use it. The next day in court, Mrs. Hayes presented Greg's evidence. Your Honor, these documents show Mr. Miller's manipulation of his own wife and his financial recklessness. Matt's face drained of color as every dirty detail was laid bare before the judge. As court recessed, I overheard Matt arguing with Celeste on a phone call. I did this for us. You knew what this was. He barked, but the line went dead. Celeste had hung up on him. His relationship with her crumbling was a small but satisfying vindication. Back in session, Matt was forced to admit his failings under cross-examination. His facade was crumbling, and the courtroom could see it. Finally, the judge spoke, her voice firm and decisive. Given the evidence presented, it is clear that Mr. Miller's actions were detrimental to the family's welfare. Full custody of Nathan Miller is awarded to Stacy Miller. Mr. Miller is required to sell the condo to settle debts and provide appropriate financial support to Stacy Miller and their son. A weight lifted off my shoulders. Relief washed over me as I hugged Mrs. Hayes, tears of gratitude streaming down my face. Matt looked utterly defeated, his once certain arrogance replaced by a grim realization of his downfall. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt a new strength within me. I clutched Nathan close, knowing the fight had been worth it. Stacy, you did it, Mom said, embracing me outside the courthouse. We did it, I corrected, looking at my family and friends who stood by me. Greg approached with a small smile. Told you you could count on me. Thank you, Greg, I said sincerely. As the crowd thinned, Angie squeezed my hand. What's next, Stacy? I looked at Nathan, then back at her. We start fresh, build a new life, one step at a time. We walked away from the courthouse, the future suddenly filled with possibilities. For Nathan. For me. For a new beginning without Matt's shadow looming over us. It was time to rebuild, stronger and wiser, ready to face whatever came next. Sitting in the courtroom once more was nerve-wracking, but I held my head high. This was the final showdown. Matt sat across from me, eyes cold and resentful. His facade of control was slipping, and everyone could see it. The judge's gavel came down, calling the court to order. Mrs. Hayes stood up, ready for battle. Your Honor, today we present further evidence showing Mr. Miller's ongoing neglect and financial irresponsibility. She displayed bank statements and documents highlighting the depths of Matt's financial mess. Each piece of evidence painted a damning picture of his recklessness. Matt's lawyer, Mr. Collins, tried to object. Your Honor, these were extreme measures taken to secure a better future for the family. The judge silenced him with a raised hand. Continue, Mrs. Hayes. She nodded and gestured toward Greg, who took the stand. Greg Miller, could you tell the court what you know about your brother's plans and actions? Greg cleared his throat. Matt was always trying to impress our father. He used Stacy and Nathan to get ahead, using family money recklessly. He even tried manipulating Celeste, but that backfired. I watched Matt squirm, trying to maintain his composure, but failing. Mrs. Hayes pressed on. And what did you do when you discovered this? I gave Stacy the evidence to show how deceitful and irresponsible Matt has been, Greg answered. Matt shot Greg a venomous look. You've always been jealous. This is all about making me look bad. Greg's face remained impassive. No, Matt. This is about doing what's right. The judge leaned forward, her expression stern. Mr. Naff Miller, it's evident from the testimonies and evidence that your actions have been detrimental to your family. Stacy has shown great resilience, and it's clear she prioritizes Nathan's well-being. Therefore, I will uphold my previous ruling. Full custody remains with Stacy, and you will comply with all financial obligations. I exhaled, relief washing over me. Matt looked shattered as the realization of his defeat set in. As we exited the courtroom, he approached me one last time. Stacy, you don't have to do this. We can work something out. I shook my head firmly. You had your chances, Matt. This is what's best for Nathan. His eyes narrowed, revealing his vile nature once more. You'll regret this. I met his gaze head-on. No, Matt. You're the one who'll regret losing us. Outside the courthouse, Angie met me with a tight hug. It's finally over. Yes, it is, I said, feeling a sense of peace for the first time in months. Mom and Dad joined us, their pride evident. We knew you could do it, Dad said, his voice filled with emotion. Greg approached, an awkward smile on his face. I'm just glad I could help. You did more than that, Greg, I said, giving him a grateful hug. Thank you. He nodded, stepping back to let me have my moment with Nathan. Holding my son close, I whispered, We did it, little one. We're free. As the days passed, Matt's financial situation worsened. He was forced to sell the condo, and his relationship with Celeste dissolved entirely. His professional reputation crumbled, and he was left grappling with the mess he'd created. Meanwhile, I focused on the future. With the legal battles behind us, I began to rebuild our lives. I returned to work in marketing, finding joy in my career once more. Nathan thrived in the loving environment my parents, friends, and I provided. One night, as Nathan slept peacefully, I glanced around our cozy home, feeling a wave of gratitude. The journey had been rough, but we emerged stronger. Karma had served its due course, and now it was time to embrace the new horizons ahead. I promised myself and Nathan that we'd face whatever came next with courage, resilience, and hope. The storm had passed, and we were ready to bask in the sunlight of new beginnings. Balancing work and motherhood proved challenging, yet rewarding. Every morning started with Nathan's cheerful giggles, a sound that fueled my day. I'd drop him off at Mom and Dad's, knowing he was in good hands, before heading to the office. Morning, Stacy, Angie said, greeting me with a warm smile as I walked in. Morning. Ready for the big presentation? I asked, feeling the familiar rush of excitement. Absolutely. Let's knock it out of the park, she replied, sharing my enthusiasm. Work offered a much-needed sense of normalcy and purpose. I threw myself into projects determined to showcase my skills and rebuild my career. My team rallied around me, respecting the balance I struck between being a professional and a mother. Back at home, evenings were filled with laughter and warmth. Nathan took his first steps, and I celebrated every milestone with my parents. Life started feeling like a new kind of normal. One evening, while feeding Nathan, my phone buzzed. A text from Greg. "Can we meet? Need to discuss something important." Curious but cautious, I agreed. We met at a local cafe where Greg's expression was serious. "Stacy, there's something you need to know," he began, his tone grave. "Matt's been trying to undermine you at the office, spreading lies to our father, hoping to turn him against you." My heart clenched. "Why won't he just leave us alone?" "Because he can't stand losing," Greg replied. "But listen, I've got an idea. There's still money involved from Dad's business, and I want to make sure Matt doesn't get his hands on it." I nodded, desperate to protect Nathan's future. "What do you need from me?" "Just your support. Together, we can redirect Dad's investments to benefit Nathan." "It's what he would have wanted," Greg explained. It was risky, but I trusted Greg. "All right, let's do this." Over the next few weeks, Greg and I worked tirelessly to secure the investments. We presented our case to his father, backed by evidence of Matt's manipulations. The old man listened, eventually agreeing to our plan. Matt's downfall continued. His schemes backfired, and he was left to grapple with the repercussions. Meanwhile, Greg and I ensured that Nathan's future was secure. One day, while playing with Nathan at the park, I felt a deep sense of peace. Angie joined us, watching Nathan toddle around with a grin on her face. "How's it feel to finally have everything sorted?" she asked. "Honestly, it's freeing," I responded, watching my son's joyful expression. "I didn't think we'd get here." Angie patted my shoulder. "You're stronger than you ever knew." As the days passed, Matt's presence in our lives faded. He struggled to find stability, his once promising career in shambles. Karma had come full circle, and he was forced to face the consequences of his actions. Meanwhile, I thrived. My career flourished, and Nathan grew up in a loving, supportive environment. We weren't just surviving, we were thriving, building a future full of hope and promise. In a final gesture of gratitude, I decided to help Greg. His loyalty and support had been invaluable. Redirecting some of the investments to aid his startup, I ensured that Matt's former schemes benefited someone who truly deserved it. One evening, as the sun set, I sat on the porch with Nathan in my lap, feeling a deep sense of contentment. I had fought hard, and it had paid off. The future looked bright, and I was ready for whatever came next. Looking at the horizon, I whispered, "We've come a long way, little one. This is just the beginning." Nathan giggled, and I smiled, filled with hope and confidence. We were ready to embrace our new horizons together, stronger than ever.